global tycoon abandoned his infertile wife. 5 years later, he spotted her with twins. "I've spoken to Dr. Lang," he said, voice smooth as polished steel. "They're calling it unexplained primary infertility. No abnormalities, no answers, just nothing." She didn't look up. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed the sob before it could escape. "I'm not blaming you," he continued, turning now, stepping closer. "I'm just tired of hoping." Her hands folded in her lap. A single tear fell onto the ceramic. It made no sound. "You know what they say about heirs, Clara?" he murmured, kneeling beside her, his knee pressing into the rug like an apology that came too late. "A dynasty needs blood, not longing, not prayers whispered into empty rooms." She finally looked at him. Her eyes, those deep, brown, soulful eyes he used to lose himself in, were hollow now. Not angry, not even sad, just gone. "Do you remember our wedding night?" she whispered. He hesitated. Of course he remembered. The candles flickering over rose petals. The way she'd kissed him with such quiet reverence, as if he were sacred, as if she were the miracle. "I do," he said softly. "I told you I'd give you everything," she said. "Not just my body, my heart, my dreams, my nights spent sketching your face while you slept, my mornings planning the nursery we'd never get to build." Her voice cracked, not with rage, but with the unbearable weight of truth. "You didn't marry me because I could carry your child, Elias. You married me because I saw you, not the CEO, not the heir, just you. The boy who cried when his dog died and hid it under his bed for 3 days." He flinched. He hadn't thought of that in 20 years. "And now," she went on, rising slowly, the tea still untouched, "you're throwing me away because I couldn't give you what you wanted? Not what you needed, what you wanted." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't let him hold it either. "I've met someone," he said, the words tasting like ash. "Isabella. She's fertile, young, healthy. She wants a family. And I want to be a father." Clara closed her eyes. "Do you know what it feels like?" she whispered. "To spend 3 years of your life hooked to machines, injected with chemicals that make you vomit for hours, to wake up every month praying to a God you stopped believing in, just so you can feel something inside you move?" He didn't answer. "I felt them," she said, tears streaming now, silent rivers down her cheeks. "Once, just once, when I was 17, a flutter, like wings. I thought it was gas, but it wasn't. It was mine. And then it vanished. And you never asked me how I felt after that. Not once." Elias opened his mouth, closed it. His throat moved. He wanted to say sorry. He wanted to beg. He wanted to scream that he didn't mean any of this, that he loved her, that he was terrified of being alone, that he didn't know how to be anything other than what the world demanded of him. But he said nothing, because the truth was he was afraid. Afraid that if he held her, he'd never let go. Afraid that if he admitted he was wrong, he'd have to become someone he didn't recognize. Clara picked up the papers. Her handwriting, elegant, deliberate, appeared beneath his signature. "I release you, not out of anger, out of love, because I love you enough to let you walk away without me." She placed the pen in his hand. "Sign it," she said, and then she turned, walked to the door, didn't look back. The elevator chimed. The doors slid shut, and Elias stood there for 10 minutes, 20, an hour, alone, with the rain still tapping, with the tea still steaming, with the ghost of a woman who had given him everything and received nothing in return. He didn't cry that night. He didn't cry for months. He built empires, closed deals, bought islands, had a son with Isabella, named him Julian, watched him smile, watched him crawl, watched him reach for his father's hand. And every time Julian laughed, Elias heard another voice, soft, quiet, "I'll give you everything." He started collecting old photographs, found one of Clara standing barefoot on a beach at dawn, holding a camera, laughing as the wind stole her scarf. He kept it behind his desk. No one knew. No one ever would. 5 years passed. The company thrived. His son grew. His marriage crumbled. Isabella left him 6 months after Julian's diagnosis. Mild cerebral palsy. "I didn't sign up for this," she'd said. "I wanted a legacy, not a burden." He sat in the dark that night, surrounded by trophies and silence. And for the first time since Clara walked out, he asked himself, what did I really lose? Not a wife, not a child, but the only person who ever loved him without conditions. And now he didn't know how to be loved at all. The world called him a tycoon, but in the quietest corners of his soul, he was just a man who had thrown away the light and forgotten how to see it again. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada topico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio topico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com vida moco. Com os sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amingles. Com 6.000 characters Quen 3. Next. 80B. A3B. The air in the Varga mansion that night smelled like lavender and loss. Elias had ordered it himself. Calming, he'd told the decorator. Something that doesn't remind me of her. But Clara had loved lavender. She'd planted it along the garden path, humming as she dug her fingers into the soil, whispering to the flowers like they were old friends. Now, the scent clung to the curtains, the pillows, the very walls, haunting him with the ghost of her presence. He sat at the dining table alone again. The crystal chandelier above cast fractured light across the empty chairs. He hadn't eaten dinner, hadn't slept more than 3 hours since the doctor's final words. There are no viable options left, Mr. Varga. Your wife's body. It simply cannot sustain a pregnancy. It wasn't her fault. But he didn't believe in fault anymore. He believed in legacy, and legacy needed an heir. A knock came at the door. Not the staff, not the security guard. This was softer, more hesitant. He didn't turn around. "I'm not hungry," he said. "It's not about food." Clara stepped inside. She wore the same sweater, the blue stripe frayed now, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was pulled back loosely, strands escaping like thoughts too heavy to hold. She carried nothing but a small leather-bound journal in her hands. He finally looked at her. Her eyes weren't red. They weren't wild. They were quiet, like a lake after the storm has passed. And you realize the water is deeper than you ever knew. "I came to say goodbye properly," she whispered. He swallowed hard. His throat felt lined with glass. "You already did," he replied. "No," she said, stepping closer. "I signed papers. I packed my things. I walked out. But I never told you what this cost me." He didn't move, didn't breathe. She sat across from him. Not on the chair, he'd moved it away months ago, but on the floor, right beside his feet, as if she still belonged there. "I lost my mother last year," she said, opening the journal. "She died holding my hand, telling me she wished she could have held my child one day." Elias's chest tightened. "She asked me, 'Did you try?' And I said yes. Every month, every shot, every prayer. Every time I lay still while they stuck needles into me. Every time I pretended I wasn't screaming inside when they told me no again." Her voice didn't break. That was worse. When people cry, you can pretend they're weak. But when they speak like stones, cold, unyielding, you realize they've already shattered. "I stopped menstruating 6 months ago," she said, looking up at him now. "Not because of the treatments, because my heart stopped believing it would ever happen." He reached for her hand. She let him take it, for 2 seconds. Then gently, slowly, she pulled away. "I don't hate you, Elias." He blinked. "What?" "I don't hate you," she repeated, her voice softer now, almost tender. "Because hate means I still care enough to burn. And I don't want to burn anymore." He stared at her. "But I'm leaving," she said. "Not because you pushed me out, but because I need to find myself again. And I can't do that here." He stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "So what? You're just giving up?" She smiled, a fragile thing like morning frost. "No," she said. "I'm choosing to live." He wanted to scream. He wanted to beg. He wanted to tell her how much he needed her. Not as a vessel, not as a symbol, but as the woman who made coffee too sweet, who sang off-key in the shower, who kept his favorite pen tucked in her pocket even though she hated writing. Instead, he said, "You'll regret this." She stood then, slowly, brushing invisible dust from her sweater. "I already do," she whispered, "every day, but I'll regret staying more." She turned toward the door, and then she paused, didn't look back, just whispered one last thing. "Don't wait for someone else to give you a child, Elias. A beat. Wait until you learn how to be one yourself." The door clicked shut. Silence swallowed the house. He stood there for 20 minutes. 21. 22. He walked to the window. Outside, rain began to fall. Slow, deliberate, like tears falling from the sky. He picked up the journal she'd left behind, opened it. The first page read, "To the man who loved my body more than my soul. Thank you for the love. Forgive me for leaving before you learned how to hold it." On the next page, a sketch. Him, asleep, in their bed, one arm draped over her waist, his face peaceful, unaware, unworthy, and beneath it, written in tiny, trembling letters, "I loved you so much I let you break me, so you wouldn't have to see how broken I already was." He sank to his knees. The journal slipped from his fingers. And for the first time since the diagnosis, Elias Varga cried. Not for the child he couldn't have, but for the woman he refused to see. And as the rain tapped against the glass, he realized something terrifying. She hadn't abandoned him. He had abandoned her. Long before the doctor spoke. Long before the papers were signed. He had stopped seeing her. And in doing so, he'd killed everything they ever were. The house remained silent. The lavender still bloomed. And somewhere, far away, a woman walked into the dawn with nothing but a suitcase, a journal, and the quiet courage of someone who had loved too deeply and survived anyway. Certo, agora a tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio tópico 3 com dialogo como su, faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoco, com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters Quin 3, next, 80b, A3b. The rain had stopped, but the silence remained. It clung to Clara like a second skin as she stood on the platform of the Greyhound station in rural Vermont. Her suitcase, a battered blue one with peeling stickers from Paris and Kyoto, resting at her feet. She wore the same sweater, the same shoes, the same hollow eyes, but something had changed. Something quiet, something unbreakable. She didn't look back, not once, even when the bus hissed open its doors, even when the driver called, "All aboard." She didn't turn toward the city lights fading behind her. Didn't glance at the high-rise windows where Elias still lived, where his name was etched into marble, where their wedding photo still hung in the hallway, untouched, gathering dust. She boarded, took a seat by the window. No one sat beside her. The bus pulled away, and then she breathed. For the first time in years, she actually breathed. 3 days later, she arrived in Portland, Oregon. A small apartment above a bakery. Rent paid in cash. No references. No ID beyond what she could forge with a library card and a forged birth certificate under the name Ana Silva. She didn't want to be found. She wanted to disappear. And for 6 months, she did. She worked mornings at a clinic for reproductive health, cleaning rooms, restocking supplies, listening. Always listening. The women came in clutching ultrasound photos, crying softly into paper towels, whispering prayers to gods they weren't sure were listening. Some held hands with husbands who stared at their phones. Others came alone. And sometimes they looked at Anna like she understood. Because she did. One afternoon, a young woman named Marisol sat across from her, holding a pregnancy test that read negative for the 7th time. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," Marisol whispered, her voice so soft it nearly vanished. My husband says if we don't have a baby this year, he's leaving. He says, I'm broken. Anna didn't offer platitudes. Didn't say, you're not broken. Didn't say, it'll happen. Instead, she reached across the table and placed her own hand over Marisol's. I was married to a man who said the same thing, she said, voice steady, raw. He told me I was defective, that my body was a failure, that love wasn't enough. Marisol's eyes filled. What happened? Anna smiled just slightly. He left. Silence. Then, what did you do? Anna looked out the window. Outside, a child laughed as she chased bubbles blown by a stranger. I started living, Anna said. Not for him, not for a baby, not for anyone else's version of worth. I started living for me. Marisol cried harder then, not because she was sad, but because someone finally saw her, not as a womb, as a woman. 6 months passed. Anna moved into a smaller apartment near the river, bought a second-hand camera, took pictures of strangers, old men feeding pigeons, mothers singing lullabies to toddlers and strollers, teenagers holding hands under bridges. She posted them anonymously online, no captions, no names, just images, quiet, honest. They went viral, not because they were beautiful, but because they were true. One photo, a mother rocking a premature twin in an incubator, her forehead pressed to the glass, became the symbol of a movement. Hashtag motherhood beyond blood. Thousands wrote to her, you made me feel seen. I thought I was less because I couldn't carry. Thank you for saying it's okay to grieve without being pregnant. She never replied, but she saved every message, taped them inside the lid of her journal. Then came the day she met Leo and Lena. They were born 3 weeks early. Twin girls, one with cerebral palsy, one deaf since birth. Their biological parents, both addicts, both homeless, left them at the hospital with nothing but a note. We can't give them what they need. We're sorry. The system moved fast. Foster homes were full. Social workers were overwhelmed. And then Anna walked in, not as a volunteer, not as a donor, but as a woman who knew what it meant to be unwanted. She didn't ask for paperwork, didn't wait for approval. She just knelt beside the isolette where Lena lay, tiny fingers curled around a pacifier, and she sang, a lullaby her mother used to sing, soft, off-key, perfect. Lena didn't react, not at first, but when Anna hummed again, this time tapping gently on the bassinet in rhythm, using vibration instead of sound, the infant's eyelids fluttered, and then her tiny hand reached up, not toward the light, not toward the nurse, but toward Anna's finger, like she'd been waiting, for years, for someone to find her. That night, Anna took them home, in a borrowed car, with 2 car seats, with no legal rights, with no money, with no plan, just a heart too full to say no. She slept on the floor beside them, every night, for weeks. She learned sign language from YouTube videos at 3 a.m. She massaged Leo's limbs until her fingers ached. She sang until her throat cracked. She cried until there were no tears left. And then she began to heal, not because they needed her, but because she needed them. One morning, Leo gripped her wrist with surprising strength and mumbled, "Mama." She froze. She hadn't expected it, hadn't dared to hope. She turned slowly, his eyes, dark, bright, alive, locked onto hers. And he said it again, "Mama." She kissed his forehead and whispered, "Yes, my love, I'm here." Later that night, Lena, silent, still always watching, reached out and placed her palm against Anna's cheek. Then slowly she smiled, not because she heard, but because she felt. And in that moment, Anna realized something terrifying. She had spent her life begging for love. Now, she was giving it, and somehow it was filling the holes inside her. Faster than medicine, faster than time, faster than any miracle she'd ever prayed for. Elias Varga didn't know any of this. He was in Zurich closing a billion-dollar merger. He was wearing a tuxedo, drinking champagne, surrounded by people who called him brilliant, successful, powerful. He raised his glass. To legacy, he murmured. No one clinked. No one noticed, because no one knew that the only legacy he'd ever truly loved was the one he'd thrown away. And somewhere, in a quiet apartment above a bakery in Portland, a woman who had lost everything had found something far more sacred. Not a child, but a purpose. Not a marriage, but a home. Not a husband, but herself. And for the first time in 5 years, Clara Mendez, now Ana Silva, was finally quietly alive. Not because she was fixed, but because she had chosen to live. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours in 3 nights. Not since the letter arrived. No return address. No stamp. Just slipped under her door like a secret too heavy to send through the mail. She had opened it at dawn, and read it once, then again, then burned it. But the words, they wouldn't burn. They lived. I know where you are. 3 lines. That was all. No threat. No plea. Just those 4 words, cold as hospital steel, and then, I'm not here to take them. I'm here to beg for a chance to see you. Elias. Her hands trembled. She looked down at Lena's face, the way her lashes fluttered with each breath, the tiny curve of her lips, so perfectly still, so utterly alive. He doesn't get to see them. He doesn't get to look at them and think, what if? She kissed Lena's forehead, then Leo's, and whispered into the dark, I won't let him ruin this. But even as she said it, she knew. He wasn't coming to take them. He was coming to see, and that somehow was worse. The next morning, she took the children to the park, a place she'd chosen carefully. Quiet, tucked behind a library. No cameras, no reporters, no strangers who might recognize her from the viral photos. She pushed Leo's wheelchair slowly along the gravel path, humming an old lullaby, while Lena sat beside her, wide-eyed, watching the leaves fall like golden butterflies. A woman nearby smiled. You're such a good mom. Ana didn't answer. She just nodded, because she didn't want to speak, didn't want to be heard, didn't want to be seen. But then, a shadow fell across the path. Slow, heavy, familiar. She didn't need to turn. She already knew. His footsteps were the same. Even now, even after 5 years. Still precise, still controlled, still like he was measuring every step before he took it. She held her breath. Lena turned her head and froze, not because she saw him, but because she felt him. Something in the air changed, like thunder before the storm. Ana stood slowly, pushed Leo's chair back, and faced him. He wore a gray coat, no tie, no watch. His hair was shorter, his face thinner, his eyes, oh God, his eyes were hollow, not cold, broken. He looked like a man who had spent 5 years building monuments and forgot how to live inside them. Ana, he whispered, not Clara, not Mrs. Varga, Ana, as if he'd been practicing the name in silence. She didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't cry, just stared at the man who had shattered her. And then quietly she stepped forward. One step, then another, until she was close enough to smell the faint scent of bergamot on his skin. The same cologne he wore the night he signed the divorce papers. He flinched. You remembered, he said. I remember everything, she replied, voice calm as ice. He swallowed. I didn't come to apologize. She tilted her head. Then why did you come? He looked past her. To Leo, to Lena, to the 2 tiny souls sleeping in the sunlight, unaware they were being watched by the ghost of their mother's past. I came to see what love looks like, he said, voice cracking like dry wood. When it isn't built on expectation. Ana didn't blink. Love doesn't need a womb to exist. I know. And yet, she said softly, you left me when I needed it most. He closed his eyes. I thought I was protecting my legacy. She laughed, not cruelly, sadly, like someone who had outgrown the language of kings. You didn't protect your legacy, Elias. She reached into her bag, took out a folded piece of paper, held it up. It was the photo, the one that went viral, the one of Marisol, pressed to the incubator glass. whispering to her unborn child. The caption beneath it, written in Anna's hand, had become a mantra across the world. "You are not broken. You are becoming." Elias stared. His throat moved. "I saw that," he whispered. "I saw it 1,000 times. And?" she asked. "I didn't understand it," he said, voice breaking. "Not until I lost everything else." He reached into his coat, took out a small object, a key, old, worn. He placed it gently on the bench between them. "That's the key to the safe deposit box at Chase," he said. "In Zurich. There's something in there. For you." She didn't touch it. "What is it?" "My will." Silence. The wind stirred the leaves. Leo stirred in his chair. Lena blinked. And then she reached out. Not toward Anna, not toward Elias, but toward the key. Her tiny fingers brushed the metal. And for the first time she smiled. Not because she understood, but because she felt something. Something warm. Something real. Elias watched, and his knees buckled. He didn't fall, didn't cry, just stood there, a billionaire reduced to nothing, by a deaf child's touch. "I didn't come to take anything," he whispered. "I came to give you back what I stole." Anna looked at the key, then at him, then at her children, and finally she spoke. Not in anger, not in forgiveness, but in truth. "You can't give back what you never had." He looked up. Tears finally broke. "They're beautiful," he said. "Yes. They're yours." "Yes. And mine." She paused. Then softly, "They're mine too." He nodded, like he finally understood. And then he turned, walked away. No goodbye, no promise. Just the sound of footsteps fading into the rustle of autumn leaves. Anna picked up the key, held it tight, and whispered to the sky, "Tell me, what am I supposed to do now?" No answer came. Only the wind, only the children, only the quiet, trembling truth that some doors aren't meant to be reopened. But some hearts are still learning how to beat. And somewhere, miles away, in a penthouse where the lavender still bloomed, Elias Varga sat alone, on the floor, clutching a photograph of her, smiling, before the pain, before the silence, before he chose power over love. And for the first time in 5 years, he didn't reach for his phone, didn't call his assistant, didn't check his stocks. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "Please, let me learn how to love again." Outside, the rain began to fall. Again. This time, it didn't feel like morning. Felt like waiting. Waiting for what? No one knew. But the key, still warm in Anna's palm, told her one thing. The story wasn't over. She hadn't touched it. Since Elias left. Didn't want to. Didn't dare. Because if she opened that box, if she saw what was inside, would it change everything? Or would it just prove he'd been lying all along? That night, as the children slept, Leo tangled in his blanket, Lena curled against her chest with one hand resting gently on Anna's collarbone, as if to say, "I'm still here." She sat at the table with the key in her palm, and she whispered, "What are you hiding from me, Elias?" No answer, just the hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the faucet, the distant wail of a train. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, she let herself cry. Not the quiet tears she'd learned to hide, but the kind that shook her ribs, the kind that came from the place inside her where grief had grown roots. "I gave up everything," she sobbed into her hands. "My name, my home, my dignity, my love. And you just walked away." The key glinted under the dim bulb, like an accusation, like a gift, like a trap. 3 days later, she went to Zurich. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed to know. She booked a one-way ticket under the name A. Silva. No passport photo, no return date, just a backpack, 2 carry-on bags filled with clothes, medicines, and photos of the twins, and the key. The bank was sleek, silent, cold. Security checked her ID twice, then asked why she was there. She didn't lie. "I'm here to open a safe deposit box," she said. "It belongs to Elias Varga." The clerk paused. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Mr. Varga passed away last week. Anna froze. The world tilted. No, she breathed. He did, the man said gently. Heart failure. Alone. In his penthouse. No family present. Her knees nearly gave out. Elias was dead? Dead? He was supposed to be sorry. He was supposed to beg. He was supposed to live long enough to see what he'd lost. Not die. Not like this. Not quietly. Not like a ghost who forgot how to breathe. She didn't cry. Not then. She just nodded and signed the form. The vault opened with a hiss. Inside one envelope. No other contents. No stocks. No deeds. No money. Just paper. She sat on the floor of the vault. Right there. In the dark. With the scent of old steel and dust around her. And opened it. The letter was handwritten. On the same stationery he'd used the night he left her. Clara, I know you'll read this only after I'm gone. I've spent 5 years trying to build something that could outlive me. But I realize now what I built was a tomb. This is not my will. It's my apology. And my confession. The day I signed your divorce papers, I thought I was choosing legacy over love. I was wrong. I chose fear. I was terrified that if I admitted how much I loved you, that I couldn't live without you. I'd have to stop being the man everyone expected me to be. I became a monument. Cold. Perfect. Empty. When Isabella got pregnant, I told myself, at least now I'll have someone to pass my name to. But when Julian was born, and they told me he had cerebral palsy, I looked at him, and all I could think was, what if Clara had stayed? What if she'd held him? What if she'd sung to him? What if she'd seen him, not as a defect, but as a miracle? I never told you this, but I watched you online, every day. I read every post you ever made under Ana Silva. I memorized the way you smiled when Leo laughed. I cried when you taught Lena to respond to touch instead of sound. I hired someone to follow you, not to take them, not to interfere, just to make sure you were okay. You were more than okay. You were beautiful, and I was too afraid to say so. So I left you a gift. Not money, not power, but freedom. All of my shares in Varga Global, 87%, have been transferred into a trust. In your name, controlled by you, to fund the Leo and Lena Foundation. For children born outside expectations. For mothers who love beyond biology. For families no one else wanted. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know, you didn't lose me. I lost you, and I've spent every waking moment since trying to find my way back. But I ran too far, too long, and now, I'm gone. And you're still here, alive, whole, more than I ever was. Please, use this money to keep building the world you created. Don't let anyone tell you your love wasn't enough. Because it was. It always was. And if you ever meet someone who sees your children the way you do, tell them, I loved him once. And I chose to live anyway. The letter ended there. No signature. Just the ink smudged slightly near the bottom. As if he'd wept while writing it. Anna sat there. For hours. The vault door remained open behind her. Light spilled in. And for the first time since Elias walked away, she didn't feel rage. Didn't feel betrayal. Didn't feel empty. She felt seen. By him. For the first time. Not as a wife. Not as a vessel. But as a woman who had turned sorrow into sanctuary. Who had raised miracles in the ruins. She stood slowly. Wiped her face. Pressed the letter to her chest. And whispered into the silence, You finally saw me. Then she walked out, into the Zurich sunlight, into the world. And when she returned to Portland, she didn't burn the letter. She didn't lock it away. She framed it and hung it above the nursery door, where every morning when Leo woke up and Lena reached for her hand, they both saw it. And Anna would whisper, This is what happens when love outlives regret. But deep down she knew. He hadn't written that letter to forgive himself. He'd written it to give her permission. Permission to live. Permission to love again. Permission to be whole. Even without him. And yet, as she tucked Leo into bed that night, Lena suddenly turned. Her small fingers reached out, Not toward Anna, not toward the wall, but toward the window, toward the street, and she smiled. Again, not because she heard, not because she saw, but because she felt something, someone, outside, waiting, watching, still, silent, alive. Anna froze. Slowly she rose, moved to the window, peered out. The street was empty. Rain glistened on pavement. A single umbrella leaned against the lamppost across the road, unopened, unclaimed, and beneath it a single white flower, a lavender sprig, still fresh, still breathing, and pinned to the stem, a tiny folded note. Anna didn't move, didn't breathe. She just stared, because she knew Elias was dead. She'd seen the obituary. She'd signed the paperwork. So who left this? And why now? The wind stirred, the flower swayed, and somewhere, in the quiet between heartbeats, the truth settled over her like a second skin. He hadn't died alone. He died waiting for her to come back. And someone who knew him had followed her, had found her, had left this, not to punish, not to haunt, but to ask, did you love him enough to forgive him? And if not, do you love them enough to let him go? Anna stepped back, from the window, from the mystery, from the past, and turned to her children. Leo grinned. Lena reached for her. And Anna, for the first time since that rainy morning 5 years ago, smiled. Not with relief, not with sorrow, but with courage. Because whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Not anymore. And whoever was out there, they could wait. Because now, every morning, before she took Leo to therapy and Lena to her auditory integration session, she'd pause at the window, her fingers brushing the glass, and stare across the street. The flower never wilted, never faded, never disappeared, simply remained, like a promise, or a warning. On the fourth morning, she woke to silence. No coughing, no rustling blankets, no tiny hands reaching for her. She sat up, heart pounding. Leo's bed was empty. Lena's was empty. Her breath stopped. She ran through the apartment. Kitchen, bathroom, closet, nothing. Then a note, taped to the fridge. In handwriting so familiar it felt like a punch to the ribs. They're safe. I'm sorry I had to take them, but you need to see what he left behind. J**. Anna's knees hit the floor. J. Not Elias. Not a stranger. Julian. Elias's son. The boy with cerebral palsy. The boy who never spoke. The boy no one knew could walk. Unless he'd been learning. Unless he'd been waiting. She ran outside barefoot. Rain slicked the pavement. The lavender was gone. But beside the lamppost, a small folded blanket. And beneath it, a single hearing aid. Lena's. Her favorite one, the one with the blue star sticker Anna had put on last week. Someone had taken it. Someone who knew its frequency. Someone who knew how to make it work. She snatched it up, held it to her chest like a relic. And then a sound, faint, from down the alley. A giggle, high-pitched, bright. Leo's laugh. Anna sprinted, turned the corner. There, under the awning of the old bookstore, stood Julian, 16 years old, taller than she remembered, wearing a hoodie, dark jeans, boots scuffed from walking. He held Leo in his arms. One arm wrapped around the boy's torso. The other, his right hand, gripped Leo's wheelchair handle. And beside him, Lena, smiling, with her head tilted, her eyes fixed on Julian, as if listening to something only she could hear. Julian looked up. His face was pale, tired, but his eyes, oh God, his eyes were full of tears and recognition. "Mom," he whispered. Anna froze, not because he spoke, but because he said it like he'd been practicing for years. "I didn't know you could talk," she breathed. He swallowed hard. "I've been practicing." "For how long?" "Since I was 10. He looked down at Leo. "He started laughing when I sang to him, not because he heard me, because he felt me. The vibration, like you taught Lena." Anna stepped closer. Her voice cracked. "How did you find them?" Julian didn't answer right away. He turned slowly, and lifted his left hand. In his palm, a small silver locket, open. Inside, a photo of Clara when she was 22, smiling, in front of the Eiffel Tower, the same photo Elias kept on his desk, the one he never showed anyone. Julian's voice was barely above a whisper. "He gave this to me on my 10th birthday. He told me, if you ever feel alone, look at her. She loved you more than anything." He looked at Anna, and then he told me something else. He paused, blinked back tears. He said, "One day you'll meet her, and when you do, don't say you're sorry. Say thank you, because she made me want to be better." Anna's breath caught. "You knew who she was." "I knew everything." Julian knelt slowly, his legs trembling, but he didn't fall. He placed Leo gently into her arms. Then he reached out and took Lena's hand. Slowly, gently, he tapped twice on her wrist. The rhythm, the exact pattern, the one Anna had taught her. Tap, tap. "You're safe." Lena's eyes lit up. She leaned into Julian and smiled. For the first time, she smiled at a stranger, and he smiled back, not with pity, not with fear, with love, real, raw, unbroken. Anna stared at them, at her children, at the boy who was both son and stranger, and whispered, "What are you doing here?" Julian looked past her, to the apartment window, where the framed letter still hung, where the words "I lost you" glowed softly in the morning light. "I came to bring them home," he said. "No," she said softly. "They're already home." He shook his head. "I mean, to bring you home." She blinked. "To where?" He reached into his pocket, took out a key, same shape, same weight, as the one in the vault. "This is the key to the house," he said. "The one in Vermont, the one you used to paint in, where you planted the lavender." Anna's chest tightened. "That house burned down after you left. I rebuilt it." Silence. The rain slowed. A bird chirped. Leo stirred in her arms. And Lena, still holding Julian's hand, tapped again. Tap, tap. "Come." Anna looked at Julian, at his trembling hands, at the way he couldn't meet her eyes, at the truth written in every scar on his soul. "You didn't come for them," she realized. He looked up, wet, voice raw. "I came for you." He took a step forward, then another, until he was close enough to smell the lavender still clinging to her sweater. "I spent 5 years learning how to speak. I spent 4 years learning how to walk without falling. I spent 3 years learning how to cry without shame." He reached out, not to touch her, just to hold the air between them. "I spent 2 years learning how to love someone who doesn't have to love me back." He exhaled and whispered, "I didn't come to fix anything. I came to ask." His voice broke. "If you'd let me be part of your family." Anna didn't answer. She didn't hug him, didn't cry, didn't pull away. She just looked at him, at the boy who carried his father's pain and his mother's strength. And then she turned, walked inside, took off her coat, put it on the chair, picked up the locket from the table, opened it again, looked at Clara's face, then at Julian, and said, "I don't know if I can forgive him." She paused, then added, "But I think I can learn to love you." Julian didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just stood there and finally let himself breathe. Outside, the wind stirred, and somewhere, in the quiet between heartbeats, the lavender bloomed again. Not on the lamppost, not in memory, but in the soil of a new beginning. And as Anna walked back outside with Leo in her arms, Lena holding Julian's hand, and Julian finally walking beside her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. Some families aren't built by blood. They're built by courage, by choice, by the quiet act of showing up when you're broken, when you're afraid, when you think you've lost everything, and yet you still reach out. Because love doesn't wait for permission. It just waits. And when you're ready, it walks toward you, with open hands, and a heart that learned how to heal, even after being shattered, even after being forgotten, even after being buried. It still blooms, still sings, Julian led them up the path slowly. Leo's wheelchair rattled over uneven stones. Lena walked beside him, her small hand gripping his fingers, her head tilted toward the wind, as if listening to the trees sing. Anna followed behind, her heart beat too loud. She hadn't set foot here since the night Elias left her, since the fire, since she burned every photo, every dress, every memory she could find, and ran. Now, the house had been rebuilt, but not restored, reimagined. The front door opened before they reached it. No one stood there, just a note taped to the wood. I couldn't bring you back, so I brought the house back for you. She didn't touch it, didn't speak, just stepped inside. The air smelled of pine resin and old paper, and lavender, always lavender. The living room had been turned into a sunlit sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in golden morning light. A low wooden table held 3 mismatched mugs. One chipped, one painted with stars, one plain white with steam curling from each. Tea, still warm, as if someone had just poured it. And on the wall, a mural, not painted by a professional, by hand, with crayons, with markers, with trembling fingers. It showed a woman holding 2 children, one in a wheelchair, one with headphones. All 3 were smiling. Behind them, a man blurred at the edges, standing far away, watching, not joining, just present. Below it, in bold, childlike letters, "This is our family." Even when he wasn't here, he still loved us. Anna's breath hitched. She turned. Julian was standing in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes wet. "I did that," he whispered, "when I was 12, after I found out you were gone." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that once couldn't hold a pencil without shaking. "I used to draw you every night, in my notebook. You cooking, you reading, you singing to Lena while she slept. I thought, if I drew you enough, maybe you'd come back." He swallowed. "I didn't know how to say it, so I drew it." He took a step forward, then another, until he stood beside her. "Last year," he said softly, "I hired an artist to paint it real, so you'd see it, and know," his voice cracked, "that I never stopped believing in you." A sound came from upstairs, soft, faint, a melody, humming, off-key, familiar. Anna froze. That song, their song, the lullaby Clara used to sing when Leo was colicky, the one Elias hated because it made him cry. She climbed the stairs slowly. Each step creaked under her weight. At the top, a door slightly ajar. Light spilled out. She pushed it open and saw Lena sitting on the floor, in the center of the room, surrounded by toys, books, stuffed animals, and a small speaker playing music. But she wasn't listening to it. She was watching the reflection in the mirror, and in the glass a figure, tall, thin, wearing a sweater too big for him, holding a pair of hearing aids, gently, like they were sacred. Elias, not alive, not ghost, but memory, projected from a hidden screen behind the mirror. A recording, his voice, hoarse, raw, trembling, filled the room. "Clara," Anna stepped inside, didn't move, didn't breathe. The video continued. "I didn't want to die alone. I wanted to die knowing you were happy. So I recorded this, every day, for a year. I knew you'd never come back, but I hoped, someday, someone would show you this. Maybe Julian, maybe a stranger, maybe you." The screen flickered. His face appeared again. This time, he was holding Lena's hearing aid, tapping twice on his wrist. Tap, tap. "You're safe." He smiled, a real smile, for the first time in 10 years. "I learned that from you. I don't need to hear to feel you. I don't need to speak to love you. I'm sorry I waited so long to understand. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'm sorry I didn't stay. But I hope, wherever you are, you know this." He looked directly into the camera, eyes full of tears, voice barely above a whisper. "You were always enough, more than enough. And I hope, one day, you forgive me." The screen went dark. Silence. Heavy. Sacred. Anna stood there, frozen, tears streaming, not from grief, from recognition, because in that moment, she didn't see a man who abandoned her. She saw a boy who didn't know how to be loved and tried to become worthy by becoming powerful, and failed, and died trying. She turned. Julian stood in the doorway. He hadn't moved, hadn't cried, just watched her, and whispered, "He didn't leave you, he got lost." She nodded, slowly, then walked to the mirror, reached up, and placed her palm against the cold glass, where his face had been, and whispered back, "I forgave you the day I chose to live." Outside, the wind stirred the lavender, and in the yard, Leo, in his wheelchair, reached for the flowers. And Lena, without being told, knelt beside him and pressed her forehead gently to his. A silent exchange, a language only they understood. Love, without words, without sound, without blood, just presence, just patience, just belonging. Julian stepped forward and knelt beside them, not as a son, not as a stranger, but as a brother. He took Leo's hand and Lena's and held them both. And then he leaned his head against Anna's shoulder. And for the first time, he let himself cry, quietly, like a storm finally breaking. Anna didn't pull away. She didn't speak. She just wrapped her arms around all three of them. Leo giggled. Lena smiled. Julian sobbed. And somewhere, in the quiet between heartbeats, the lavender bloomed again. Not because it was spring, not because the soil was kind, but because someone finally remembered to water it. And now they weren't alone. They never had been. The house didn't need fixing. It just needed to be lived in. And now it was, with 4 hearts, broken, bent, but beating, together. And outside, on the windowsill, a single white envelope sat, unopened. No name, just a date, written in ink. Tomorrow. Anna stared at it. Her chest tightened, because she knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning, and whatever lay inside wasn't meant for her. It was meant for them, for all of them, and tomorrow they'd open it together, not as strangers, not as survivors, but as family, finally, and completely, and whole. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid, because love, real love, doesn't ask for perfection. Anna didn't touch it. She couldn't, not yet. Instead, she sat on the floor beside the children as they played, not with toys, but with silence. Leo traced patterns on Lena's arm with his fingers. She responded by tapping back. Tap, 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 a rhythm only they understood. Julian knelt beside them, copying their game, mimicking the beats until Lena giggled. A sound so rare, so pure, it made Anna's chest ache. They were learning each other, slowly, gently, like flowers pushing through frozen earth. And above them, the recording still played on loop. Elias's voice, quiet and trembling, whispering into the dark. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how to love you while I was alive." It wasn't haunting. It was healing. That night, no one slept. Anna sat at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of her, a single candle flickering between them. Julian came in quietly. He wore the same sweater Elias used to wear, blue, frayed at the cuffs, and carried 3 mugs of chamomile tea. He placed one in front of her, one beside Leo, who was asleep in his chair, one for himself. Then he sat, silent, for a long time. Finally, "I didn't know he recorded all of this," he said. Anna didn't look up. "I didn't either." He kept the hard drive hidden in the lining of his coat, the one he wore the day he passed. Julian swallowed. "I found it when I was cleaning out his study." He'd labeled it, "For Clara. Only if she's ready." Anna's fingers curled around the mug. "He knew I'd come." Julian nodded. "He knew you'd never forgive him." Pause. Then, "But he hoped you'd remember him." Anna looked at him then, really looked, at the way his eyes mirrored Elias's. Same shape, same depth, but softer, warmer, less afraid. "You loved him," she said. Julian didn't answer right away. He stared into his tea. "I hated him," he whispered, For years. For making me feel like a mistake. For never looking at me the way he looked at you in those photos. For leaving you, and leaving me alone with my body that wouldn't obey me. His voice cracked. I used to scream into pillows because I thought if I tried hard enough, if I walked just one more step, maybe he'd notice me. He looked up. Tears glistened. But then, I saw you. He smiled, small, sad, beautiful. I saw you holding Lena like she was your whole world. I saw you teaching Leo to reach for things even when his hands shook. I saw you singing off-key to strangers on the internet and not caring if anyone listened. He reached across the table, didn't touch her, just hovered his hand above hers. I realized you didn't need him to be whole, but I did. He exhaled, and I didn't want to be like him anymore. Anna's breath caught. What do you mean? Julian turned his head toward the window, where the lavender swayed under moonlight. I want to be the man who stays. He looked back at her. I want to be the father Leo needs. The brother Lena understands. The son you didn't know you could have. He paused, then whispered, Will you let me try? The air thickened. The candle flickered. Outside, the wind stilled, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Anna didn't speak. She reached out, slowly, and took his hand, not to comfort him, but to say, I see you. I hear you. I believe you. Julian closed his eyes, and for the first time he didn't cry from pain. He cried from being seen. And then a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. Tap, tap, tap. Lena's signal. Anna stood. Julian followed. They opened the door. No one was there, just the porch light glowing. And on the step, another envelope. Smaller, thinner, written in a child's hand. In crayon. Blue, red, green. It read, Mommy, open. Tomorrow. It's not from Dad. It's from us. Leo and Lena. Anna's heart stopped. She looked at Julian. He looked at her. Neither spoke, but they both knew. This wasn't Elias's final letter. This was theirs. Their beginning. Their promise. Their love. Unspoken, unscripted, unstoppable. Back inside, they lit another candle. Sat together. Leo stirred in his chair. Lena crawled onto Anna's lap. Julian wrapped his arms around them all. And they waited, not for answers, not for closure, but for morning, because tomorrow wouldn't be about forgiveness, or guilt, or ghosts. It would be about truth, the kind that doesn't come from words, but from hands that hold, from eyes that watch, from hearts that choose to stay, even when it hurts, even when it's messy, even when you're not sure you deserve it, because love isn't earned, it's given, and sometimes it waits for 5 years, in the rain, in the silence, in the space between heartbeats, until the person who needed it most finally learns to open their hands and accept it. Morning came slow, golden, quiet. The children woke before dawn. Leo pointed to the envelope. Lena tapped Anna's knee. Tap, tap. Open. Anna knelt before them, held the envelope gently. Her fingers trembled. Julian stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding Leo's. Lena pressed her forehead against Anna's cheek and whispered, not with sound but with soul, we're here. Anna broke the seal. Inside, 2 drawings. One by Leo, a stick figure family, for figures, holding hands, under a sun. Above them he'd written, This is US. We are not broken. We are built. The second drawing by Lena. No lines, no shapes, just smudges of color. Blue, purple, yellow. But beneath it, in tiny letters, drawn with a pencil so sharp it almost pierced the paper, We love you. Even when you were afraid. Anna didn't cry. She laughed. Soft, real, like the first note of a song she'd forgotten she knew. Julian pulled her close. Leo reached up and kissed her cheek. Lena pressed her small palm to Anna's heart. And Anna, for the first time since Elias walked away, whispered into the sunlight, I'm not alone. She looked at Julian, at Leo, at Lena, at the house, at the lavender, at the life they'd built not from blood, but from bravery, from choice, from grace. And then she turned to the window, to the garden, to the place where the lavender grew wild and strong, and said, "To no one, to everyone, to you, Elias." Her voice broke. "But we're not done. We're just getting started." And somewhere in the breeze, in the petals, in the silence, a voice answered, not with words, but with warmth, with peace, with the quiet certainty that some loves don't die. They transform, they wait, they bloom again, in hands that choose to hold, in hearts that learn to stay, and in children who teach us that family isn't born, it's chosen. And sometimes it takes 5 years to find your way home. But when you do, you'll know. Because love doesn't knock. Not touching, not speaking, just there. Like he'd been waiting his whole life to stand in that exact spot. Outside, the wind stirred the lavender. And then a sound, faint, not from outside, from upstairs. A whimper, then a cry. Not Leo's, not Lena's. Too small, too new, too wrong. Anna's head snapped up. Julian was already moving. They ran, up the creaking stairs, down the hall, to the room they'd left untouched since Elias died. The nursery, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, a bassinet, white, wooden, new, not there yesterday, not there last night, but now, it glowed in the morning sun. And inside, a baby, swaddled in pale blue, eyes closed, crying softly, not from pain, from hunger, from loneliness, from needing to be held. Anna froze. Her breath vanished. Julian stepped forward slowly. He didn't touch the child, didn't speak, just looked at the tiny fingers curled around a single lavender sprig, tucked beneath the blanket, as if someone had placed it there on purpose, as if they'd known she'd come back. Anna whispered, Who is this?" Julian turned to her. His face was ashen. His voice cracked like dry ice. "I don't know." Then he pointed. On the side of the bassinet, a note, taped with clear tape, written in the same shaky, tired handwriting as the recording. "Elias's, I couldn't give you children, but I gave you one more chance. This one isn't mine, but she's yours. Her name is Alara. She was born 3 days ago. Her mother died in childbirth. No father, no family, only a letter. She asked me to deliver it to you if you ever came home. I didn't know if you would, so I waited. I waited until I knew you were ready. I'm sorry I didn't live long enough to hold her, but I hope you will." Iana's legs gave out. She sank to the floor. The drawings slipped from her hands. She didn't reach for them, didn't scream, didn't cry. She just stared at the baby, at the lavender, at the note, at the man who had spent his final months not building empires but building this. A gift, not money, not land, not legacy. A child, a soul, a second chance. Julian knelt beside her. Slowly, carefully, he reached into the bassinet, gently lifted the baby, held her against his chest. The crying softened, then stopped. Alara's eyelids fluttered, opened, blue eyes. Not Elias's gray, not Clara's brown. Something else, something wild, something new. She stared at Anna and smiled, not because she understood, but because she felt it. The warmth, the safety, the love that had waited 5 years for her. Anna reached out, trembling. One finger, just one, touched the baby's cheek. So soft, so small, so alive. "She's beautiful," Anna whispered. Julian nodded. "She has your smile." Anna looked at him. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He just tilted the baby's face toward the window, where the sunlight caught her skin, and for a heartbeat, the shadow on her left temple matched the curve of Clara's cheekbone. The same dimple, the same arch of her brow, the same way her lips parted when she breathed. Anna's breath hitched. "No," Julian whispered. "She doesn't look like Elias. She looks like you." Anna's vision blurred. She pulled the baby closer, wrapped her arms around both child and Julian, and for the first time she wept. Not tears of grief, of loss, of regret, but of recognition, of destiny. of a love so deep it refused to die, even after death, even after silence, even after betrayal, found its way back, through lavender, through silence, through a child no one else wanted, a child who wasn't meant to be born, but was meant to be loved. Alara nestled into Anna's chest and sighed, as if she'd been waiting for this moment, since before she took her first breath. Julian looked down at them and said, "She's not an accident. She's a miracle." Anna looked up, tears streaming, voice raw. "But why? Why now? Why her?" Julian didn't answer right away. He reached into the bassinet again, took out another envelope, smaller, thinner, taped to the bottom, written in a different hand, delicate, feminine, not Elias's, someone else's. He handed it to her. Anna opened it. Inside, a single page, handwritten, in ink. "Dear Clara, I never met you, but I saw you. In every photo Elias kept. In every song he hummed under his breath. In the way he cried when he thought no one was listening. I was his nurse, his last friend, the one who held his hand when he couldn't hold his own. Before he died, he told me, 'Find her. If she's still alive, tell her I saved something for her.' I didn't know what he meant until I found out I was pregnant. I didn't want this baby. I didn't think I deserved her. But Elias, he made me believe I did. He told me, 'You're not carrying my child. You're carrying hers.' He paid for everything. Paid for the hospital. Paid for the lawyer. Paid for the adoption papers. He didn't ask for anything, except one thing, that when she's old enough, I tell her, 'Your mother loved you before you were born. Your father loved you even when he couldn't say it. And you are the proof that love never dies. It just changes shape.' I didn't know how to be a mother, but I knew how to let go. So here she is. Welcome home, little one." Anna read it, once, twice, then pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "You didn't just leave us a child." She looked up at Julian. Her voice broke. "You left us a legacy of grace." Julian didn't answer. He just kissed her forehead, then gently lowered Alara into Anna's arms, and said, "She's not our daughter because of blood." He paused, looked at each of them. Leo asleep in his chair, Lena tapping softly on the windowsill, and now Alara, tiny, perfect, whole. "She's our daughter," he said, voice thick with wonder. "Because you chose her." Anna looked down, at the baby, at the lavender tucked beneath her blanket, at the note, at the man who had loved her enough to die trying, and at the boy who had loved her enough to stay. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I forgive you, Elias, not because he deserved it, but because she needed to, because love isn't about justice. It's about healing, and sometimes healing comes wrapped in swaddling cloth, with lavender-scented blankets, and eyes that look just like yours, and a heart that beats, not because it was meant to, but because it was chosen to be loved, again, and again, and again." Outside, the wind stirred the garden, and for the first time, the lavender bloomed all at once, purple, wild, unstoppable, as if the earth itself had finally remembered what love looks like, when it refuses to die, and when it finds its way home, even after being buried, even after being forgotten, even after being broken. It blooms, not for the past, but for the future, for the ones who dared to stay, for the ones who learned to love anyway, and for the child who didn't need a father, or a mother, or a perfect story. She only needed to be held. And now she was, by four hearts, broken, bent, but beating, together. And as Alara's tiny fingers curled around Anna's thumb, for the first time in her life, Anna didn't feel alone. She felt full, complete, whole, not because she'd been given back, but because she'd chosen to keep loving, even when it hurt, even when it cost her everything, even when it seemed impossible. Love doesn't ask for permission. It just waits. And when you're ready, it shows up. With lavender, with a baby, with a son who stayed, and a house that remembers, and a woman finally home. And somewhere, In the quiet between heartbeats, a voice whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And Anna, with her child in her arms, didn't reach. He just stared, as if he'd been waiting for her. Lena stood by the window, silent as always, but she hadn't moved since dawn. Her gaze never left the bassinet, not because she couldn't hear, but because she felt something. Something new, something alive. Julian sat cross-legged on the rug, watching them all. He hadn't spoken since they found the baby, hadn't eaten, hadn't breathed right, like his soul had finally caught up with his body. And then Leo reached out, slowly, his fingers trembling, not toward Anna, not toward Julian, toward Alara. His hand hovered over the blanket. Then he touched her foot, just once, a brush, so light it might have been the wind. Alara stirred, her eyelids fluttered, and then she smiled, not because she knew him, not because she understood, but because his touch, warm, real, quiet, called to her, like a song only souls remember. Anna held her breath. Julian leaned forward. Lena stepped closer, and then something impossible happened. Alara turned her head toward Lena and cooed, soft, clear, a sound, not a cry, not a whimper, a greeting. Lena froze. Her hands trembled. She looked at Anna, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Anna didn't answer, because she didn't need to. Lena took one step, then another, until she stood beside the bassinet. She reached down, not with her hands, with her eyes, her whole being bent toward the baby. And then she tapped, once, on the side of the bassinet. Tap. Alara turned again, smiled, and this time she made a sound. Not random, not accidental, a vibration, a hum, low, sweet, rhythmic, matching the tap. Tap, tap, Julian gasped. Anna's heart stopped. They both knew. This wasn't coincidence. This was connection. Lena didn't hear with her ears. She heard with her skin, with her soul. And Alara somehow was speaking back, in rhythm, in resonance, in love. Lena looked up at Anna. Tears spilled, not from sadness, from recognition. "She's mine too." Anna nodded. Slowly, gently, she lifted Alara, carried her to Lena, held her close. "Say hello," Anna whispered. Lena reached out. Her small fingers brushed Alara's cheek. And then she tapped. Twice. Tap, tap. Alara didn't cry, didn't turn away. She tilted her head and answered with a soft, humming sigh. Julian sank back onto his heels. His voice cracked. "She's not just hearing you," he swallowed. "She's listening to you." Anna looked at him, at the way his eyes shone. Not with tears, but with awe. "You've spent your whole life trying to speak," she whispered. "And now?" She looked down at Alara, at Lena, at the space between them where silence had become song. "Now, someone has learned how to listen." Lena tapped again. Tap, tap. Alara hummed. It went on, back and forth. Conversation, without words, without sound, only feeling, only truth. Julian rose, walked to the bookshelf, took down an old journal, Elias's. He opened it, flipped through pages filled with scribbles, notes, lists, drawings, and then he stopped, held up a page, written in red ink. One sentence, underlined twice. "If she ever meets a child who speaks without sound, tell her I knew she would be the one to understand her." Anna's breath hitched. Julian looked at her. He wrote that the week before he died. He closed the journal. I didn't know what he meant. He turned to Lena, to Alara, to this. He exhaled. "I thought he was losing his mind. But now," his voice broke, "I think he was seeing the future." Outside, the wind stilled, the lavender swayed, and inside, the room held its breath. Because for the first time, they weren't just a family. They were a miracle, a living echo of everything Elias had tried and failed to say. Love doesn't always speak. Sometimes it taps. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes it waits 5 years to be heard. That night, they didn't sleep. They gathered around the fire pit outside, the one Elias had built the year he bought the house, before he forgot how to be still. They wrapped themselves in blankets, Leo asleep on Anna's lap, Elara cradled against Lena's chest. Julian sat beside them, holding their hands. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The stars above blinked like witnesses. The fire crackled. And then Lena shifted, pressed her ear to Elara's belly, and listened, silent, still, for a full minute. Then she looked up at Anna and tapped 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Elara responded, not with a hum, but with a giggle, tiny, bright, like wind chimes in spring. Julian laughed, a real laugh, for the first time in years. Anna cried, not from grief, from wonder, because this quiet language was theirs. No doctor could explain it. No therapist could teach it. No machine could measure it. It was born in the space between 2 hearts, one deaf, one newborn, both abandoned, both chosen, both loved. And now they spoke, together, as if they'd known each other since before time. Julian leaned into Anna. Do you think he knew? Anna didn't answer right away. She watched Lena press her forehead to Elara's, their breaths sinking, their rhythms merging. And finally, she whispered, I think he didn't just leave us a baby. She looked up at the stars. I think he left us a bridge between silence and sound, between loss and belonging, between what we lost. She kissed Leo's head. And what we were given. Julian squeezed her hand. What do we do now? Anna looked at each of them. Leo still asleep, safe. Lena smiling, humming. Elara curled against her, breathing in perfect rhythm. And herself no longer broken, just becoming. She stood, walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at the garden, where the lavender bloomed wild, unplanted, unwanted by anyone else. But here, thrived, because it was loved. She turned back and said, we raised them. Simple, final, whole. We raised them together. Julian nodded, and then he did something he'd never done before. He reached into his pocket, took out a small wooden box, engraved with initials, Evie. He opened it. Inside, a single silver locket. Open. Inside, a tiny photograph of Clara, when she was young, smiling, holding a camera, and beneath it a note, in Elias's handwriting. I kept this because I thought one day you'd want to see yourself again. Not as my wife, not as a failure, but as the woman who taught me how to love without conditions. Give it to her. Tell her. She was always enough. Anna took it, turned it over, and saw on the back 2 names, engraved in tiny script. Not hers, not Elias's. 2 names, one after the other. Clara Mendez, Elara Varga. She gasped. Julian stepped closer. They're the same name, he whispered. You gave me your last name when you adopted Leo. You never told me why. Anna looked down at Elara, at her own reflection in the locket, and realized Elias hadn't just named the baby. He'd given her back her name, her identity, her legacy, not as a wife, not as a mother by biology, but as a mother by choice, by courage, by love. She opened the locket, placed it gently around Elara's neck, then kissed her forehead, and whispered, Welcome home, Elara. The wind stirred, the lavender swayed, and somewhere, in the quiet between heartbeats, a voice answered, not from the past, not from the grave, but from the future, from the child, from the silence, from the hum, from the tap, from the love that refused to die. And in that moment, Anna knew this wasn't the end of Elias's story. It was the beginning of theirs, and they wouldn't need words to be heard. They already were, because love, when it's real, doesn't shout. It sings, in the spaces between, in the quiet, in the gaps, in the hands that hold, in the hearts that choose, even after everything, even after death, even after silence, finds its way through lavender, as if it had been waiting since the moment she was conceived for this exact skin to hold it. Anna didn't take it off, not for baths, not for sleep, Not even when Alara fussed, tiny fingers clawing at the chain as if she knew. This was hers. And so was the name, Alara Varga. It wasn't just a name. It was a resurrection, a reclamation, a quiet rebellion against everything Elias had once believed, that love needed blood to be real, that legacy needed a son, that a woman who couldn't carry was empty. Now, she carried 3 children, all born of brokenness, all raised by grace. And one of them, the smallest, was named after the woman he'd abandoned. And he'd known all along. 3 days passed. The house breathed again. Leo learned to reach for Alara's hand. Lena learned to hum back when Alara cooed. Julian learned to sit still. And Anna, she began to write. Every night after the children slept, she sat at the old oak desk in the corner of the nursery, the same desk Elias had used to sign divorce papers. Now, it held journals, photographs, letters, and a single pen, the one Clara had given him on their 10th anniversary. He'd kept it, wrapped in velvet, in his top drawer. Julian found it when he cleaned out the study. He brought it to Anna. "Do you want it?" he asked. She took it, turned it over, engraved on the barrel, "For the woman who sees me." She smiled through tears and wrote, "Not for publication, not for fame, just to remember. Day 1. She smiles when I tap, not because she hears me, but because she feels me. That's how Lena taught me to love. And now, Alara teaches me how to listen." Day 3. Leo reached for her today. His hand shook. He didn't grab, just hovered, like he was afraid to touch something too beautiful. Then she giggled, and he cried, not from sadness, from wonder. I think he recognized her. Day 5. Julian kissed my forehead last night, said, "You're not healing." I asked why. He said, "Because you're becoming." She stopped writing, looked up. Through the window, moonlight spilled across the lavender. And there, standing at the edge of the garden, a figure, tall, still, wearing a coat too thin for the cold. Not Elias, not Julian, someone else. A woman, gray hair pulled into a loose braid, hands folded, watching, waiting. Anna didn't move, didn't call out. She just stared, because she recognized her. From the letter, Mira, Elias's nurse, the woman who carried his child, the woman who gave her away. Slowly, Mira stepped forward, one step, then another, until she stood beneath the porch light. Her face was lined with grief, with exhaustion, with peace. She didn't knock, didn't ring the bell, just lifted her hand and tapped, twice, tap tap, on the wooden railing, exactly like Lena, exactly like Alara, exactly like the language they'd built. Anna rose, walked outside barefoot. The grass was damp. The air smelled of earth and pine. Mira didn't smile, didn't cry, just looked at her and whispered, "I came to see if she remembered." Anna didn't answer. She turned, walked back inside, returned with Alara in her arms. The baby was awake, eyes wide, curious, as if she'd been waiting for this moment too. Anna held her out, not toward Mira, toward the night, toward the stars, toward the silence. And then she tapped, once, on Alara's blanket. Tap. Alara didn't cry, didn't turn away. She blinked, then hummed, low, soft, matching the rhythm. Myra's breath caught. Her knees trembled. She reached out, not to take the baby, not to hug Anna, just to hover her hand above Alara's head, like she was afraid to touch heaven. And then she tapped, back, tap. Alara answered. Mira sobbed, not loudly, just a quiet, shuddering sound, like a tree releasing its last leaf. "She remembers," she whispered. Anna nodded. "She remembers everything." Mira looked up, eyes raw. "I didn't know what to do with her. I thought, if I gave her to you, she'd be safe. But I didn't know if you'd ever come back." She swallowed hard. "I waited 6 months. Every day, I watched your blog, your photos. I saw you singing to strangers, teaching deaf children to feel music. I read every word you wrote." She wiped her cheek. I thought maybe you'd forgotten him, but then I saw you holding that little boy and the girl who never spoke, and I realized." She looked down at Alara. "She wasn't just his gift. She was yours." Anna didn't speak. She just held Alara closer and whispered, "You gave her to me." Mira nodded. "I did. And now, I'm here to say thank you." Anna finally looked at her, really looked, at the lines around her eyes, at the way her hands shook, at the loneliness carved into her bones. "You didn't just give us a baby." Anna's voice cracked. "You gave us proof that love doesn't end. It just changes shape." Mira closed her eyes. "For 5 years, I've carried her. I fed her, changed her, sang to her. I never told anyone her name. I didn't want her to be a memory. I wanted her to be a miracle." She opened her eyes, looked at Anna. "Will you let me stay?" Anna didn't answer right away. She looked at Alara, at Lena watching from the window, at Leo reaching for the moonlight, at Julian standing behind her, silent, steady. And then she looked back at Mira and said, "You don't have to ask." She stepped forward, took Myra's hand, and placed it gently on Alara's back. "Welcome home," Mira gasped. Her fingers curled around the baby, and for the first time she wept, not from guilt, not from sorrow, but from belonging. Alara stirred, smiled, and hummed, "Hmm." Mira pressed her forehead to the baby's and whispered, "I'm here." And then to Anna, "I'm not leaving." They stood there, 5 women, for children, 1 garden, 1 locket, 1 silence, 1 song, and no words were needed, because the truth had already been spoken in taps, in hums, in trembling hands, in lavender blooming where nothing else could grow. Later that night, as the fire crackled low, Julian handed Anna a new journal, black leather, no title, just a single phrase stamped on the front. "We were never broken. We were becoming." She opened it, wrote on the first page, "This is our story, not of loss, not of abandonment, not of blood. It's the story of 4 souls who chose each other, of a man who loved so deeply he died trying to say it, of a woman who refused to be defined by what she couldn't give, of a child who spoke without sound, of a nurse who gave away her child so another mother could find hers. We are not whole because we were never broken. We are whole because we chose to heal together. And if you're reading this, you're not alone. Love doesn't need a womb. It needs a heart. And yours is still beating. Keep going." She closed the book, looked at the room, at Alara, asleep on Myra's shoulder, at Lena, humming softly beside her, at Leo, tangled in blankets, smiling in his dreams, at Julian, watching them all, his eyes full of something he'd spent his life afraid to name, peace. She walked to the window, opened it, let the cool night air in, and whispered, "To everyone who's ever been told they're not enough," she smiled. "To everyone who's ever lost a child or a lover or themselves. To everyone who thinks they've failed," she pressed her palm to the glass. "And to those who still dare to love anyway." Outside, the lavender swayed, and somewhere in the dark, 1,000 hearts, somewhere in the world, stopped, listened, and whispered back, "I'm still here. I'm still loving. I'm still becoming." And Anna, she turned, walked back to the fire, sat down, wrapped her arms around her family, and finally, for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was missing something. She felt full, complete, enough, not because she'd been saved, but because she'd chosen to save herself. By saving them, and in doing so, she'd become more than a mother, more than a wife, more than a survivor. She had become a miracle, made of silence, made of taps, made of hums, made of lavender, made of love that refused to die, even after death, even after silence, even after being told you were never enough. You were always more. You were always home. And now they all knew it, together, always, forever. And the next morning, when the sun rose, there was no need to speak. because the wind sang for them, and the lavender listened, and the children, all four of them. Mira held her against her chest, humming low, a tune she'd learned from Elias's old records, a lullaby he used to play on rainy nights when he thought no one could hear him cry. Lena sat cross-legged on the rug, eyes fixed on Alara's mouth, not because she expected sound, but because she knew the shape of a smile, the curve of a breath, the way lips part before a hum. And then Alara opened her mouth, not to cry, not to whimper, but to sing. A single note, pure, clear, untrained, unafraid. It hung in the air like a bell struck underwater. Lena's eyes widened, her fingers twitched. Then she leaned forward, tapped, once, tapped. Alara didn't pause. She answered, another note, higher this time. Lena tapped again, tap tap. Alara sang back, 2 notes, melodic, intentional, as if they were having a conversation. Julian froze in the doorway. Leo stirred in his chair. Anna stood motionless by the window. They didn't speak. They didn't move. Because this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't reflex. This was language. And it had been born between 2 souls who couldn't hear, but could feel everything. Mira looked up. Tears streaked her cheeks. She's not just responding, she whispered. She's composing. Anna stepped forward, slowly, kneeling beside Lena. She reached out, not to touch, to mirror. She tapped, twice, tap tap, and then she hummed, low, soft, just a vibration in her throat. No pitch, no melody, just breath. And Alara, she paused, looked at Anna, eyes wide, curious. Then, she opened her mouth and sang, not 1 note, not 2, but 3, in sequence, ascending, like a question. Lena gasped. She turned to Anna and tapped, fast, 3 times, tap tap tap. Then she pointed, at Alara, then at herself, then at Anna, then at Mira, then at Leo, then at the walls, then at the sky, as if saying, we are all singing now. Julian dropped to his knees. His voice cracked. She's learning our language. He swallowed hard. But she's not copying us. He looked at Alara. You're teaching us. Alara smiled and hummed again, this time a full, clear tone, long held, like a promise. And then she reached out, tiny fingers stretching, not toward Mira, not toward Anna, but toward Leo. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he moved, slowly, shakily, his left hand, weak, trembling, lifted, and brushed her cheek, just once, gentle as dawn. Alara didn't flinch. She closed her eyes and sighed, a deep, contented sigh, like she'd been waiting for that touch since before she was born. And then she sang, 1 word, not spoken, not heard, but felt, in the silence, in the air, in the space between heartbeats. Mama! Anna froze, every muscle locked, every breath vanished. She looked at Mira, Julian, at Lena, all of them staring, all of them holding their breath, because no one had said it, no one had taught her, no doctor had recorded it, no therapist had predicted it, and yet, there it was, a word, from a baby who had never heard a human voice, who had never been told the name for love, and still, she found it, through touch, through rhythm, through the quiet, sacred connection only broken hearts understand. Mira sobbed. I think, she whispered, I think she knows who you are. Anna didn't answer. She didn't dare. Instead, she reached out and took Alara into her arms, pressed her small body to her chest, and whispered, I'm here. Alara didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. She curled her tiny fingers around Anna's necklace, the locket, the silver one, with Clara's face inside, and she hummed, again, same note, same rhythm, same feeling, as if she were saying, I know you, I've always known you, you're my mother. Anna broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quietest way possible. Her shoulders shook. Tears fell onto Alara's hair, and she whispered, "I'm sorry I waited so long to come home." Alara tilted her head and kissed her, right on the chin. A soft, wet press, like a blessing, like a seal, like a vow. Julian stood, walked to the bookshelf, took down Elias's journal, flipped to the last page. There, beneath a faded sketch of a woman holding 2 children, a new entry, written in ink so faint it looked like a memory. If she ever sings before she hears, tell her, love doesn't need ears. It needs a heart that remembers. He looked up, at Anna, at Alara, at Lena, at Mira, at Leo, and said, he knew. Anna nodded. He knew. Outside, the wind stirred the lavender, and something happened, something impossible. One bloom, tall and wild, bent toward the house. Its petals trembled, then opened, revealing inside a single drop of dew, catching the sunrise, and reflecting not the sky, not the trees, but 4 faces, Anna, Lena, Alara, Mira, all together, as if the earth itself had painted them. Julian walked to the window, reached out, touched the petal, and whispered, "We're not a family because we share blood." He looked back at them. "We're a family because we chose to be." Leo stirred. He reached out and touched Alara's foot. She smiled and hummed. Lena tapped, tap tap. Alara answered, And then Mira joined in. She hummed too, low, warm, matching the rhythm. And slowly, Anna began to sing. Not a song she knew, not a melody from childhood, but a sound that came from somewhere deeper, from the place where grief became grace, where loss became legacy, where silence became song. And for the first time, they all sang together. No instruments, no words, just voices, vibrations, breath, heartbeats. 5 women, for children, 1 garden, 1 truth. Love doesn't ask to be heard. It asks to be felt. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to listen, it finds its way to you. Even through silence, even through death, even through years of being told you weren't enough. It finds you in the tap of a finger, in the hum of a baby, in the way a mother holds her child, like she's holding the whole world. And when you finally believe you're not broken, you're becoming, you realize you were never alone. You were just waiting, waiting for someone to remember how to love you, waiting for someone to tap, waiting for someone to hum, waiting for someone to say, I'm here. And now they were, all of them, together, at last. And outside, the lavender bloomed again, not because spring had come, but because love, real, stubborn, unbreakable love, had finally remembered how to grow. And this time, it wasn't going anywhere. It had found its roots, in hands that held, in hearts that stayed, in children who spoke without sound, and in mothers who learned at last how to listen. And so the story didn't end. It just changed frequency, from pain to peace, from silence to song, from I lost you to I found you. And every morning after that, when the sun rose, they gathered, around the fire, around the table, around the bassinet, and they sang, not with voices, but with presence, with touch, with rhythm, with love. And no one ever asked, how did you do it? Because the answer was simple. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering. And you don't build a family by blood. You build it one tap, one hum, one breath at a time. And sometimes that's all it takes to turn sorrow into sanctuary, to turn silence into song, to turn a ghost into a home, and a baby who never heard a word into the most beautiful thing they'd ever known. Because love doesn't need ears. It just needs a heart that remembers and dares to sing, even when no one else is listening, even when the world says you're broken, even when you're afraid you'll never be whole. You sing anyway, because Alara sang every morning, not because she was happy, not because she was fed, but because she remembered. And the others, Anna, Lena, Mira, Julian, even Leo, began to listen differently, not with their ears, with their bones, with their breath, with the quiet space between heartbeats where truth lives. One evening, as the fire crackled low and the children slept curled together on the rug, Alara nestled between Lena and Anna, Leo half-draped over Myra's lap. Julian sat alone by the window, staring at the lavender. He'd been quiet for days. Not sad, not distant, just holding something he hadn't dared to name. Anna brought him tea, warm, sweet, the way he liked it. She didn't sit, just stood beside him, silent, waiting. Finally, he spoke. "I used to hate this house." She didn't react, just nodded. "I hated that he bought it." He swallowed. "That he thought he could fix everything with wood and stone." He looked at her. "Do you remember the night he told me he was going to leave Isabella?" Anna remembered. She'd been gone 5 months then. Elias had called Julian just once. In the middle of the night, Julian had been 16, crying, because his schoolmates had laughed at him again, because his legs wouldn't obey him, because he felt like a mistake wrapped in flesh. And Elias had said, "I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I'm coming home, not to fix you, to learn how to be with you." Julian had hung up, didn't believe him. 3 weeks later, Elias died, and Julian never forgave him. Until now. He turned to Anna, voice raw. "I found something today." He reached into his pocket, took out a small,